The legends of humanity had long been dismissed as fabrications, exaggerated myths passed down through generations of alien civilizations. The Galactic Council, an assembly of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, had labeled these stories as outdated fables meant to instill fear into the younger races. Historians debated the origins of the myth, theorizing that humanity had been nothing more than a primitive race that had vanished before achieving interstellar significance, without physical evidence. No ruins, no artifacts, no genetic traces. There was nothing to suggest humans had ever existed at all. And yet, the fear lingered. Among the Zel-Zor, a species that prided itself on its vast empire and military dominance, the tale of the Terran Federation was used as a cautionary reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Their military academies spoke of an old war, one fought in the distant past against an enemy that was relentless, cunning, and above all, unstoppable. Their warriors were taught that such an enemy had once existed, but had faded into obscurity. No one had ever seen a human, nor had any record of their civilization been found, and so the lesson eventually became a story, the story became a rumor, and the rumor faded into nothing. It was only when the beacon was activated that the myth clawed its way back from the depths of forgotten history. Commander Vyric of the Zel-Zor Dominion had been leading a routine patrol along the uncharted borders of their empire when the signal reached his ship. At first, he dismissed it as another anomaly, a rogue transmission bouncing through the void from some forgotten wreckage. But the signal was persistent. It pulsed with a rhythmic pattern, unlike anything he had encountered before. It carried an encrypted frequency so ancient that it had not been catalogued in the Dominion's vast archives. That alone was troubling. Every signal ever recorded had been logged, studied, and classified. This one, however, was something else entirely. He ordered his crew to trace the source. It led them to a dead system, a cluster of shattered planets orbiting a dying star. There was no sign of life, no reason for any beacon to exist here, but as his fleet moved in, his sensors locked onto something beneath the surface of the third planet's frozen crust. An artificial construct buried deep within the ice. Vyric sent a team to investigate. His soldiers, elite in their field, descended onto the frozen wasteland with practiced efficiency. What they found was beyond comprehension. The structure, once excavated, revealed a network of tunnels and corridors reinforced with alloys the Zel-Zor had never seen before. Their scanners struggled to analyze the material, and the more they searched, the more the realization crept in. This was no ordinary ruin. In the heart of the structure, they found it. A monolithic chamber, its walls covered in inscriptions that no known species could translate. At the center stood a terminal, long dormant but intact. One of Vyric's engineers hesitated before approaching, running his claws over the dust-covered surface. The symbols embedded into the machinery reacted instantly, illuminating the chamber with a cold blue glow. The ground rumbled beneath them as something deep within the facility came to life. The beacon had awoken. A pulse shot out into the void, a signal traveling faster than light, piercing through the cosmic silence. Vyric's crew scrambled to shut it down, but it was too late. Whatever had been triggered, it had completed its task. The beacon had sent its message, though to whom none of them knew. A chill ran through Vyric's spine as he turned to face the inscriptions again. There was something eerily familiar about the patterns, something unsettling in their rigid structure. And then, as his sensors finished processing the ancient symbols, his worst fears were confirmed. The translation was crude, imperfect, but it was enough. It was a name that should not have existed. Terran Federation. Vyric's mind raced. The Dominion had searched for centuries, had scoured the stars for evidence of the so-called humans, and had found nothing. To discover something now, buried in an ancient ruin, meant only one thing. They had been wrong. Humanity had been real. Transmission came through his communicator, his second-in-command's voice laced with urgency. More signals had been detected. The beacon had not just sent one message, it had activated something else, Long-dormant systems hidden beneath the ice were coming online. Automated defenses, war machines whose technology surpassed anything in the Dominion's arsenal were stirring to life. And worse still, the signal had not just traveled through the system. It had gone beyond. It had sent a message into the deep, into the unknown, to coordinates that no civilization had ever dared to chart. And somewhere, in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, something was waking up. The silence in the control room of the Zelzor flagship was suffocating. Commander Virik stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the holographic display flickering before him. The beacon's transmission had finished, but the consequences of its activation had only begun. His fleet's sensors had detected a secondary wave of signals erupting from the ancient structure beneath the ice, spreading outward like ripples in a vast, unseen ocean. His communications officer had tried to jam the signal, but whatever technology had sent it was too advanced, too deeply rooted in the structure's foundations for any interference to matter. Virik exhaled sharply, his claws tightening around the armrest of his command chair. He had led countless campaigns, crushed rebellious worlds, and expanded the Dominion's reach to systems once thought unreachable. But this was different. He had no enemy to face, no army to outmaneuver. Instead, he was staring at the edge of something far beyond his understanding. A cold voice interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we've identified the trajectory of the transmission." The officer's tone lacked its usual confidence. It was not directed at any known empire or recorded outpost. A pause. "It was sent to deep space coordinates, outside of mapped territories." Virik's stomach twisted. "Show me." The holographic display shifted, revealing a three-dimensional projection of the galaxy. The Dominion's empire sprawled across a sizable portion, its systems marked with strategic hubs and fleet movements. The Galactic Council's territories stretched beyond, intertwining with other established powers, but beyond all of them, past the last recorded star charts, lay an empty void. Uncharted space where no empire had dared to expand. It was a dead zone, devoid of habitable planets or resources, and yet the beacon's signal had traveled directly toward it. Virik turned his gaze to his intelligence officer, a sharp-eyed veteran who had served the Dominion for decades. "What's out there?" The officer hesitated, his mandibles clicking softly as he sifted through classified data. Finally he spoke, his voice subdued. "Centuries ago, long before our expansion, early scouting missions detected anomalous structures deep within that sector. The probes sent to investigate never returned. The Dominion deemed the area a navigational hazard and abandoned further exploration." Virik narrowed his eyes. "And no one questioned why?" The officer hesitated again. "There were theories. The region exhibited gravitational fluctuations that suggested artificial constructs of enormous scale, but without physical evidence, the Dominion dismissed the claims. Some speculated it was a remnant battlefield of an extinct race. Others believed it to be a trap laid by an unknown force." Virik exhaled slowly. If the beacon's transmission had been received, then whatever existed out there was no longer dormant. His second-in-command approached, his expression grim. "Commander, our long-range scanners are picking up movement. Something is emerging from the ice." Virik strode toward the main viewport, where the frozen world stretched below them. His fleet hovered in low orbit, their dark hulls casting vast shadows across the landscape. A deep fissure had formed in the planet's surface, ice fracturing outward as something massive began to rise. The first structure to emerge was unlike anything Virik had ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and impossibly intact, as if it had been waiting beneath the surface untouched by time. Towering pylons lined its exterior, pulsing with energy that defied the laws of physics. The entire construct shimmered with a strange light, as if reality itself was bending around it. Then the ships came. They did not resemble any known design, their angular frames giving them an eerie, predatory appearance. Their hulls, covered in the same alien inscriptions found inside the ruins, bore a singular emblem, a sigil that matched the translated markings from the beacon. Virik felt his breath hitch. These were not relics of a lost civilization. These were warships, functional, operational, and now fully awakened. A new transmission flared to life across his fleet's communications array. It was not a message, not a voice. It was a sequence of numbers and symbols repeating over and over. His intelligence team scrambled to decode it, their eyes wide with alarm as the translation appeared. The Deckless confirmed status reclamation. Initiating Phase 1. The words sent a shiver down Virik's spine. He turned sharply to his officers. "Get me a direct link to Dominion High Command, now!" But before his command could be executed, the ships below shifted. Their engines flared to life, and in a single synchronized motion, they lifted from the surface. Then they vanished. The Dominion's most advanced tracking systems failed to follow them. The vessels had accelerated beyond measurable speeds, blinking out of existence without any sign of traditional propulsion. Panic spread through the control deck. The implications were clear. These were not just ancient ships. They belonged to a force with technology centuries ahead of the Dominion. And worse still, they had not remained here to fight. They had gone somewhere else. Virik clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The fleet that had just disappeared was heading toward the deep space coordinates, toward the place no empire had dared explore, toward whatever force had once controlled these ships. If this truly was connected to the legends of humanity, then the myth was no longer just a story. It was a warning. And they had just woken it up. The void beyond map space was a place few dared to approach. It was a stretch of darkness so vast and untouched that no empire had ever claimed it, no fleet had ever successfully navigated it, and no probes had ever returned from it. It was here, in the cold abyss beyond the last charted stars, that something ancient had begun to stir. The beacon's transmission had reached its destination. A long-dormant system, buried deep within the ruins of a forgotten civilization, had received the signal. Machines that had not moved in millennia activated in eerie unison, their mechanisms untouched by time, as if they had always been waiting for this precise moment. Massive structures hidden within the swirling clouds of a dying star's nebula flickered to life. Towering shipyards, cloaked in darkness for untold centuries, slowly powered up, their skeletal frameworks stretching out into the abyss like the ribs of a slumbering beast. Energy coursed through long-dead conduits, illuminating ancient halls where no organic life had walked for an age. The vast expanse of the installation, extending across a dozen drifting asteroids, was a monument to forgotten engineering, a stronghold built with a precision far beyond anything the known galaxy could comprehend. Then the fleet awoke. Colossal warships, encased in the dust of time, began to move within their cradles. Their hulls, crafted from an alloy that reflected no known light, shimmered as their systems activated. Each vessel bore a single unifying emblem, a symbol etched into their armor in a language lost to history. As power surged through them, their once dark corridors filled with the hum of reawakening technology. A lone ship, positioned at the heart of the fleet, stood apart from the others. It was a command vessel, larger than any dreadnought or battleship known to the empires of the galaxy. It had not moved in untold generations, yet now its engines flared, thrusters glowing with an eerie blue light that pulsed like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. Deep within this ship, a single interface remained dark. It was a sealed chamber, untouched by the chaos of time. The walls bore intricate carvings, inscriptions that no alien historian had ever deciphered. Then, as the final sequence of the beacon's transmission was received, the chamber illuminated. The words etched into the metal pulsed once, twice, and then faded into a single stark phrase. Authorization, Terran Federation. Status, reclamation. The ship's dormant AI, a construct of unparalleled complexity, reawakened. It did not hesitate. It did not question. It merely executed its command. Across the fleet, thousands of ships powered up simultaneously. Engines roared as energy surged through their long, silent reactors. Defensive systems activated, weapon systems ran self-diagnostics, and shielding fields flared to life. The fleet, built for a war long forgotten, had waited in silence for this very moment. Then, it moved. One by one, the warships detached from their docking cradles. Their immense forms cast long, sweeping shadows as they drifted free from the ancient shipyards. No organic crew piloted them. No flesh-and-blood being stood aboard their decks. These vessels operated under an intelligence far beyond biological comprehension. The first ships aligned in precise formation, their trajectories shifting toward a singular destination. The message had not just awakened them, it had given them orders. Orders they would obey without hesitation. The armada of the Terran Federation had returned. At the edge of the system, a single vessel remained behind, a station-sized construct with capabilities unknown to any living species. Its core pulsed, scanning the fleet as it departed, ensuring that every system was operational. Then, as the last ship vanished into the void, the station executed its final task. A pulse rippled outward, traveling at unfathomable speed. It was not a distress signal, it was not a warning, it was an announcement. The message echoed through the fabric of space, cutting through the silence of the stars. Humanity has returned, and in the heart of the galaxy, where the most powerful empires reigned, the signal was received. The Galactic Council's chambers had never known true silence until now. The signal had arrived only moments ago, cutting through encrypted channels, bypassing every security protocol as if those defenses had never existed. The message was simple, yet its weight pressed down on the gathered officials like an unstoppable force. Humanity has returned. High Chancellor Siphos of the Zorathian Dominion sat frozen, his elongated fingers gripping the edges of his ceremonial desk. His mind, trained to manage interstellar conflicts and diplomatic manipulations, struggled to process the implications. He had dismissed the rumors, had ignored the hushed whispers that spoke of a long-lost civilization that had once shaken the foundations of the galaxy, and now that civilization had announced its return, not through envoys, not through negotiations, but through a declaration that carried an undeniable certainty. He turned to the holographic display flickering in front of him, watching as dozens of emergency transmissions flooded in from various sectors. The fleet had not gone unnoticed. Chancellor, a sharp voice interrupted, belonging to Grand Strategist Korin of the Vaurani Dominion. His normally stoic expression was strained, his furred brow furrowed as his violet eyes darted between incoming reports. Our deep space scanners confirmed the presence of an unknown fleet approaching the galactic core. The ships bear no known insignia, aside from the emblem described in ancient records. Siphos exhaled sharply. Numbers? Korin's jaw tightened. More than 2,000 warships with unknown classifications. Their technology is, he hesitated as if reluctant to say the next words, beyond anything we've encountered. The Chancellor's skin darkened, a clear sign of stress in his species. The Council had ruled over the galactic core for millennia, dictating laws and controlling the flow of power with an iron grip. No force had ever threatened its stability, not the warlords of the Outer Rim, not the rebellious colonies of the inner sectors. And yet now, an unseen force had awakened, one that did not recognize their authority. A new transmission came through, bypassing the Council's firewalls with alarming ease. A single image filled the chamber, a warship unlike any the Council had ever documented. It loomed in the darkness of space, its hull gleaming with an eerie, unnatural sheen. The design was both elegant and menacing, its sharp edges and reinforced plating suggesting a vessel built for nothing less than absolute dominance. But it was not the ship itself that sent a shiver through Sifos' spine. It was the emblem displayed on its hull, a symbol that had once been feared across the stars, a symbol that had vanished, thought to be erased from history, the sigil of the Terran Federation. He forced his voice to remain steady. What do we know about their movement? Quarian shifted uneasily. They are not attacking. Not yet, but they are advancing with unwavering precision. Their trajectory is clear. They are heading toward the Council's central system. Sifos' mind raced. This was not a typical invasion, nor was it an act of diplomacy. The humans were not seeking negotiations. They had not sent representatives, nor had they demanded recognition. Instead, they had made one statement and moved forward, as if the galaxy already belonged to them. The council members erupted into panicked debate, voices overlapping in a chaotic clash of fear and arrogance. Some demanded immediate military action, insisting that the combined fleets of the Council's empires could overwhelm any force, no matter how advanced. Others urged caution, citing the lack of information on human capabilities. "Silence!" Sifos slammed his hand against the table, sending a sharp crack through the chamber. The voices stilled, though the tension in the air remained. He turned to Kiran. "Summon every available fleet to the core sectors. We cannot afford hesitation." Kiran hesitated. "With all due respect, Chancellor, what if we are already too late?" The question lingered in the chamber, unanswered. Moments later, the first visual confirmation of the fleet arrived. Long-range probes relayed footage from the outer sectors, displaying the human warships in chilling detail. Their movement was seamless, each vessel gliding through the void in perfect formation. They did not communicate. They did not waver. They did not acknowledge the fleets that scrambled to intercept them. Then, without warning, the first engagement occurred. A battle group from the Council's military, composed of highly trained officers and some of the most powerful dreadnoughts in existence, had been deployed to halt the unknown fleet's advance. The commanders had not waited for orders. They had seen the ships and had assumed hostility. The battle lasted exactly 43 seconds. Sifos watched in horror as the footage played before him. The Council's warships opened fire first, unleashing devastating barrages of plasma and kinetic artillery. The human fleet did not respond, not immediately. The projectiles struck their shields, dispersing in harmless waves of energy. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The human warships retaliated with a precision that defied logic. Their weapons were unlike anything the Council had encountered. The energy signatures defied classification, their projectiles moving at speeds beyond the limitations of known physics. The first Council dreadnought was reduced to molten debris in a single shot. The second never even had a chance to react. Within moments, the entire battle group had been annihilated. The footage cut off. The chamber remained deathly silent. Sifos closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. The Council had faced many wars. It had crushed rebellions, fought against rogue factions, and quelled uprisings with calculated efficiency. But this was not a war. This was something far worse. This was a reckoning. He turned back to Kiran. "Prepare the Council's evacuation protocols." Kiran's expression darkened. "We are abandoning the core worlds?" Sifos met his gaze. "We are not abandoning them. We are recognizing the inevitable." Kiran did not argue. He simply nodded. The war had never been a question. It had never been a choice. The Council had believed itself unchallenged, but it had always been living in the shadow of something far greater. Now, that shadow had returned, and soon it would reach them. The fleet moved with an eerie silence, its colossal ships gliding through the void toward the heart of the Galactic Council's dominion. There was no urgency in their advance, no erratic movement or hesitation. It was the march of inevitability. The quiet, steady progression of a force that had already decided the fate of the galaxy before its arrival. In the command chamber of the High Council's primary stronghold, Sci-Fi stood before the great panoramic viewport, watching the distant stars. His reflection in the glass looked older, heavier, as though the weight of centuries had settled upon him in mere moments. Reports had flooded in, more fleets obliterated, more worlds left defenseless. Some species had already surrendered before the Terran fleet had even reached them, their leaders understanding that resistance was nothing more than a futile delay. He turned away from the viewport and faced the gathered members of the High Council. Panic had transformed them. Some shouted for a last stand, for a desperate attempt to turn the tide through sheer numbers. Others whispered about escape, about abandoning the Council's great citadel and fleeing into the unknown, hoping that the humans would not chase those who did not stand in their way. Corin remained silent, his sharp violet eyes locked onto the strategic hologram that displayed the inevitable. The human fleet was closing in, their formation tightening as they approached the capital system. He had studied war his entire life, had seen conflicts that had rewritten the political landscape of the galaxy, but never had he witnessed an enemy who fought with such terrifying efficiency. The humans did not waste time. They did not posture or negotiate. They advanced, they struck, and then they moved on, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Sifo spoke at last, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his mind. "We are past the point of resistance." His words carried through the chamber, forcing the gathered officials to face reality. "We will not stop them. We will not break them. The question before us is not whether we fight, it is whether we survive." Corin exhaled, his jaw tightening. "Survive how, Chancellor? We do not know what they want. We do not even know if they will listen." Sifos's gaze darkened. "Then we will find out." A single transmission channel was opened. It was the first time since the fleet's arrival that anyone had attempted direct communication. The Council's most advanced encryption and security measures ensured that only those authorized could send or receive, and yet the moment the signal was activated, the transmission was intercepted before Sifos had even spoken a word. The holographic display in the chamber flickered, static washing across the interface. Then a voice, cold, measured, undeniably human, spoke for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Authorization recognized. Council communication acknowledged." Sifos inhaled slowly. "This is High Chancellor Sifos of the Galactic Council. I speak for the sovereign powers of the core worlds." Silence. Then the voice responded. "Your sovereignty has already been revoked." The words sent a chill through the chamber. Some of the council members paled. Others exchanged glances filled with dread. Sifos maintained his composure. "We do not seek war with you," he said carefully, choosing every word with precision. "We wish to understand your purpose." Another silence. Then the voice returned. "Reclamation." Corin leaned forward. "Reclamation of what?" There was a pause, and then, for the first time, something changed in the transmission. The image of a figure materialized, a human, standing tall, his face unreadable, his uniform pristine. The insignia on his chest was unmistakable, the sigil of the Terran Federation. His voice carried no emotion, everything. Sifos felt the weight of that single word settle upon him like a crushing force. He had feared the destruction of the Council, had anticipated the collapse of the great powers that had ruled for generations, but now he understood. This was not about conquest. This was not about retaliation. This was a return. The humans had never been defeated. They had never been lost. They had simply been waiting. And now they had come to reclaim what they believed had always been theirs. The hologram flickered again, and then the voice. No longer the humans, but something deeper, something mechanical and ancient, spoke one last time. "The Terran Federation does not negotiate. Your cycle of rule has ended. We are here to correct history." The transmission cut off. Beyond the viewport, the first human warships breached the planetary atmosphere. the capital of the Galactic Council, the jewel of the core worlds, stood defenseless. No fleets remained, no armies could hold them back. The myths had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again.